Hello, this is Eric Pepke again. It is still December 12th, 2001. Nothing to see here. Move along. Just as Michael Jackson said in Captain EO, to here. So, in prison, it took me a couple of years to realize that the American people in the greatest democracy in the world of all time do not care about anything. They especially do not care about their rights or any of the things that they can do as a citizen. I am not being sarcastic at all. Sometime in another video, I'll try to explain why this is exactly what happens with democracy all the time, everywhere. Sorry about the wind, but I can't do anything about it. Anyway, I was still trying to publish. Now, of course, I am still publishing now with these videos, or at least I hope to, but I'm only doing it out of spite because I know it won't do any good whatsoever, and I know that, and I have accepted that. But I'm doing it anyway because, again, out of spite. Sort of randomly, I discovered a good organization called the Prisons Foundation. And what they will do is that they will allow prisoners to send in a book of between 100 and 500 pages, unless it's poetry, then it could be shorter. And they will scan it and put it up on the web for free. And I said, this is great. Now, I wanted to get a book out quickly, so what I did was I went through many of the essays that I had written, retyped them, and also typed little explanatory notes. And I called it Dead Man Switch. That is the whole book. The dead man motif is kind of cheesy, but when they give you a death threat, it's stupid not to use it as a brand. You can see it in that little circle over there. So I typed it up and sent it in. And I had written an essay called Racism and the Liberal Mind. And it was rubbish. I published it anyway with an explanatory note saying that this describes or exemplifies the cognitive effects of the 3 weeks, more than 3 weeks, of completely uninterrupted wakefulness that they subjected me to in Franklin, North Carolina jail. And if you want to know what the Supreme Court thinks about that kind of thing, see Ashcroft versus Tennessee, I believe 1944. Unfortunately, Ashcroft, I think, only experienced 48 hours of sleeplessness. As a computer geek, I probably wouldn't even have noticed 48 hours, but I could tell you for certain that well over 500 hours works a lot better. It really softened me up, which was desirable to do before my arraignment and my guilty plea, as was preventing me from knowing what a guilty plea was. So I don't want to go on that too much. But anyway, it was rubbish. This is probably rubbish too. I probably still have considerable hippocampal damage, but also I have gotten more information about the central theme. And this information came about in the first year of the plague, when there was all that kerfuffle, which lasted about 15 minutes, over Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd. Now, I have been depressed to see YouTube videos about it because most of the people are saying, oh, he was on drugs, that's why he died. And what they are really saying is that they think it would be heinous, absolutely heinous, to train cops in how to deal with medical emergencies, medical conditions. That would make baby Jesus cry. And all of the things that I have seen are based on that. The people on what is called the other side are no more intelligent than that, and that's what this video is about. Now, there were a couple of promising events that only lasted about 15 minutes and were immediately quashed by the press for reasons that I will explain. They're very simple reasons, easy to understand, and they flow directly from observation. One was when Fox News took a couple minutes off from filleting cops to be upset that one of them had shot and blinded a videographer. That went away almost instantly, of course. The other was when a bunch of moms and veterans were doing their thing in Oregon. Now, that went away instantly, but let's point out that Oregon was started as an all-white state, and up to, I believe, you can look it up, I don't have access to a computer here, it was still illegal to be black after dark until the late 1970s or early 1980s. But then again, hippocampal damage messes up your time sense and your memory. So I'm not 100% sure. Those were exciting because those were the right things to happen. Now, during that period, the first year of the plague, I was locked in myself, pretty much. Well, the door was open. I could go to the bathroom. But we couldn't actually access much news except for the prison MP3 player that I had, which also had an FM radio. Surreptitiously and against the rules, I had to renew that every 2 weeks so that I could continue to listen to news. I couldn't listen to the TV news because they had all the TVs off. But still, I listened to a lot of NPR, and I noticed some extremely distressing things. Now, some people believe, and I have no idea why, that there are two political sides in this country, and they call them conservative and liberal, which are stupid terms because there is no actual conservatism or liberalism involved. They're just two sides. They're very close for reasons that are made clear by game theory, and they pretend to represent something that people call the political spectrum. And then people vote for the Repugnocrats unless they vote for the Repugnocrats. And they all believe that the Repugnocrats are good, and the Repugnocrats, on the other hand, are terrible. And they would never vote for a Repugnocrat instead of a Repugnocrat. And this is American politics in a nutshell. Well, I noticed some things. The Repugnocrats on Fox News, well, it's pretty simple. Their attitude was, good, another dead nigger. And please, don't tell me I should use the N-word, because when people use the N-word, they know what they mean, they want you to think it, but they also want to say that I, unlike you, am not a racist, and I would never use that word. But of course, that's exactly what they mean. And it's a word, it means something, and like all words, it's how you use it and what you use it pragmatically to mean. Well, that at least has the advantage of being pretty straightforward and pretty honest and pretty easy to figure out. NPR, on the other hand, maintained some very, very disturbing things, which were an insidious kind of racism. And it's not reverse racism either. It's exactly the same white against black racism that made America great. And I noticed a few things. First of all, a year or two, or I don't remember because my hippocampus is damaged, there was this thing about how Lieutenant John Pike basically hosed down a bunch of Occupy protesters with pepper spray as if they were a flower bed. And that was such a meme that I kept seeing over and over again people who had photoshopped a picture of him into like old paintings about the founding parents, and that was a big deal. No mention of it whatsoever. I also remember a little thing called Kent State, and I listened carefully, and I asked other prisoners, which I thought occasionally when they let us out of our cells, to pay attention to try to see if NPR would mention Kent State. And the only time I know of, a prisoner friend of mine called Mosmeyer, which is some Germanic word meaning gong farmer, if you want to know, he said he heard it once only to state that it was totally different. Totally. And we shouldn't think about that at all. It was all about racism, which, to be fair, quite a lot of it is. I'm trying to be honest with my statistics, and if you're born black in this country, you have about a 4.5 times as much chance as being messed about with by our criminally unjust system as if you're not black. And so that's true. But then again, there are a lot more white people, or at least non-black people. And so what you should see is this kind of thing happening to white people about as often. And you do. I had quite a collection, which is doubtless part of why the federal government decided to shut me down by destroying me. And but you don't ever see about these things on the media, and there's a reason for it. And the reason is that the so-called left and the so-called right have exactly the same business model under our great capitalist society. And that includes NPR, and they're just as capitalist as everybody else. They just pretend that it's voluntary donations and stuff from taxes. So let's go to the supposed liberal viewpoint. It isn't glee. It goes about like this. Oh, gee, isn't it terrible what those racist cops are doing to those neighborhoods of color? And of course, of color means dark enough to sympathize with, but not dark enough to lower property values. Gosh, I'm glad I don't have to go to one of those neighborhoods. And my little Johnny doesn't have to go to one of those school districts. Come out, Johnny. Show us how you learned to play the violin at the Montessori school. Isn't that sweet? And back to NPR. I noticed a few things. Whenever white people came to the protests, it was always like this. Gosh, a mickle, dickle, pickle. Are white people now being sympathetic toward black people? Because this is a Black Lives Matter protest. Because this only ever happens to black people, you know. You white people, don't worry about it. Just have a nice almond milk latte and give to the pledge drive. And as a reward, we'll send you a CD with 2 hours of uninterrupted tube and throat singing. This is how the so-called liberal mind views race. Now, I said I'd tell you why they do this. And Fox News, NPR, Pacifica Radio, MSNBC, CNN, and all those people, no matter what you call them on the political spectrum, have the same business model. And the business model is don't spook the spooks. And the reason for this is because Whitey pays the bills. And you don't want Whitey to think that he has a dog in this fight, because if Whitey thinks he has a dog in this fight, then he might switch to the classic rock station and not listen to your stuff and pay at the pledge drive. Or he might switch to, I don't know, Law and Order instead of Fox News and not buy the products that you advertise on the TV. And oh, by the way, I read a book by Richard Dawkins, and he pointed out quite correctly that when he was in America in the 60s, he realized that the term law and order was code for anti-black prejudice. Now, I have certainly, since then, found out a great deal about the insouciance of the poltroons of our mighty, mighty free press. But that's another video. As the great Vanna White said, bye-bye.